The Vedic Civilization. The coming of the Aryans marks the beginning of a new civilization in northwest India. It was quite different from the earlier Indus Valley civilization. There are different views on the origin of the Aryans. The commonly accepted view is that they came from Central Asia, perhaps in search of better pastures for their cattle. Historians are of the opinion that Aryans came across the Hindu Kush mountains between 1750 BC and 1500 BC. They entered India through Khyber Pass and thus came to be known as Indo-Aryans. The word Arya is a Sanskrit term which means noble, used in reference to their dominant position in the society. Aryans in the Sapta Sindhu and Gangetic Valley. The region where the Aryans first settled in India was called Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers. It was also called Brahmavarta. The Central Asian theory of the origin of the Aryans is based on some basic words of common use spoken by these people even today. The period of their stay, ranging from 1500 BC to 1000 BC, is known as the early Vedic period. It is also believed that the Vedas were composed at that time. The Aryans spread to the Indo-Gangetic plains between 1000 and 600 BC. This period is also known as the later Vedic period. This region came to be known as Aryavarta. Here they faced stiff resistance from the inhabitants, whom they termed as Darius. The Aryans had horses and better weapons, which helped them against Dacius. They arrived in batches, as they were divided into many tribes. Each tribe wanted to dominate the other. So, it resulted in not only the wars between the Aryans and the Darius, but also in intertribal wars. The earliest written records of Indian civilization are the Vedas. They are the literary records of the Aryans and a priceless treasure of knowledge. The Vedic literature is broadly divided into 2 categories, Shruti and Smriti. The 4 Vedas come under Shruti text. Vedas were probably authored during 1800 and 600 BC. The Vedas are very important religious and social revelations. The term Vedas is derived from the texts of the Aryans. They are said to be derived from the Sanskrit word vid, which means to know. These Vedas contain hymns, explanation of rituals, ways of meditation, and melodies. These are divided into various sections and passed on from one generation to another. They are 4 in number: Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharvaveda. Rigveda deals with the knowledge of hymns of praise for recitation. It is the oldest and largest Veda with almost 1028 hymns in praise of gods and goddesses. Surya, Varuna, Indra, and Agni are some of the gods spoken about. Saraswati is the divine river in the Rigveda. Fact file: Gayatri mantra in Rigveda is dedicated to deity Savitri. Samaveda deals with the knowledge of melodies for chanting. This is a collection of melodies of 1,549 stanzas meant for special priests called Udgatris. Yajurveda deals with the knowledge of the sacrificial formulas for public worship. It consists of prose mantras to be recited during rituals like yagna. It comprises 1,875 verses. Atharvaveda deals with the knowledge of magic formulas. The hymns contained in this Veda deal with karma, upasana, and jnana. It has about 760 hymns, carrying religious explanations of the hymns and practices. Brahmanas are important social and religious explanations of rituals of the 4 Vedas. They indicate the value of sacrifices and commentaries on hymns of the Vedas. These stories and legends included in the Brahmanas enrich our understanding. The concluding part of the Brahmanas is called the Aryanakas, emphasizing morality and meditation. The Vedas are the most authentic sources of information about the Vedic period. They give insights into religious practices and the social and economic life of that time. The Upanishads denote the last phase of the Vedic period and reveal the final aim of the Vedas. The doctrines of karma and theories of universe creation are discussed therein. Puranas are ancient Hindu texts that explore myths, legends, and history from creation to destruction. Sage Vyasa, the narrator of the Mahabharata, is considered the compiler of the Puranas. The Puranas were transmitted orally before being written down. The Puranas are 4 in number: Mahapurana, Upapurana, Sthala Purana, and Skanda Purana. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata were compiled during the later Vedic period. It took a long time for them to be completed. This epic is said to be the work of sage Valmiki. It centers around Lord Rama, the eldest son of King Dasharatha, and his actions as a son, a king, and a husband. Sita, his wife, epitomizes Indian womanhood. The Ramayana stresses the philosophy of family values. Bharat refused to take over the throne and ruled only on Lord Rama's behalf. The underlying message is the victory of good over evil. Ravana, who represents evil, was finally defeated. The Mahabharata is said to be the work of sage Vyasa. It is about the conflict between cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, leading to the Battle of Kurukshetra. Arjuna was not keen to fight against his cousins. Lord Krishna proclaimed that performance of duty was everyone's dharma. This discourse given by Lord Krishna to Arjuna forms the basis of the Bhagavad Gita. The Mahabharata stresses the victory of good over evil and the importance of doing one's duty without any expectations. Early Vedic period, 1500 to 1000 BC. A group of families lived in Grama, village, headed by Gramani, village headman. Several tribes were called Janas, headed by Rajan, chieftain, who protected his tribe. He fought wars and offered prayers to gods on behalf of his tribe. He was assisted by Senani, army chief, Purohiti, chief priest, and Gramam for social issues. He ruled with the consent and approval of the people. There were several Subay, Samiti, and Gume where issues were discussed. There was no established revenue system. People voluntarily offered their share. The basic Aryan social unit was Kula, family, based on patriarchy. The eldest male member was called Kulapati or Grilapun and made important decisions. Women enjoyed respect and status equal to that of men. They had rights to education and choosing their husbands. Monogamy was practiced. Widows could remarry, and marriage was considered sacred and indissoluble. Initially, there were cultivators, priests, warriors, and dasyus. These groups were not fixed. One could follow any profession according to one's wish. Slowly, the caste system developed based on the initial groups. The division was between the first 3 groups and the dasyus. Dasyus were made to do all the manual work, mostly dark-skinned. The fair Aryans thought themselves superior and kept aloof from the dark dasyus. This division was called Varna, meaning colour. Gradually, divisions started to be based on occupation. 4 Varnas or castes could be distinguished. Brahmins performed religious ceremonies and taught students. Kshatriyas protected their tribe. Kings belonged to this Varna. Vaishyas engaged in economic activities. Shudras mainly served others and worked for their benefit. People belonging to the first three Varnas could change Varna based on occupation. Both vegetables and animals are staples, like rice, barley, beans, and sesame. Cow slaughter was prohibited, but fish, goats, and bulls were used for food. Intoxicating drinks from corn and barley, called sura and sima, respectively. Dresses made from cotton, wool, and deerskin were worn by people. Garments consisted of three pieces: nivi, parivan, and arka. Gold-embroidered garments were popular among men. They wore jewelry such as earrings, necklaces, bangles, and anklets. Men kept beards and moustaches, adding to their appearance. War dance, chariot racing, hunting, music, and gambling were amusements. Women gave dance and music performances with various instruments. Domestication of animals was crucial, particularly cows. Their worth was often measured in cows, a reflection of wealth. The horse was vital for victories in wars and was also domesticated. Other animals like sheep, goats, and dogs were also domesticated. Craftsmen like potters, carpenters, and weavers played essential roles. Metalwork, especially with iron, was undertaken by skilled artisans. Agriculture gained importance. Forests were cut and crops were planted. Initially, land was owned by villages and later divided among families. The early Vedic people did not believe in idol worship. They worshipped in the open air, performing yajnas and chanting Vedic hymns. The early Vedic Aryans believed in one supreme god. They revered many natural forces as manifestations of the main god. Animal sacrifices were common. The early Vedic gods are classified into three categories. The earthly gods included Agni, Saraswati, and Prithvi. Agni was important as ceremonies were held in front of Agni. During the late Vedic period, Aryans moved eastwards. They called this region Aryavata. The king dominated every sphere of life of his subjects. Kingship became generally hereditary. Ashwamedha Yajna was performed by the king to expand his empire. A horse followed by an army was allowed to roam freely. The horse's journey determined kingdoms to conquer. Eventually, the horse was sacrificed during the yajna. The Japaya Yajna and Vajrasuya Yajna were other rituals performed for the betterment of the king and his kingdom. By this time, the position of women had degraded. Their main duty was to marry and look after their husband and children. They were no longer allowed to participate in the assemblies. The closest male member was the head of the family. Time brought about changes in religious practices. The importance of deities like Shiva and Vishnu became prominent. Methods of prayer underwent great changes. Rituals and sacrifices became very important. Religion became expensive and complicated. And for all religious activities, the Brahmins asked for dakshina. According to historians, Shiva is the same as Rudra. The king performed sacrifices for himself and his tribe's welfare. At that time, the Upanishads were devised. They introduced karma and the concept of moksha. The caste system became rigid and hereditary, with increasing dominance of Brahmins and Kshatriyas over others. The life of the Shudras became more miserable. More subcastes were created with the advent of new professions. The life of an Aryan was divided into 4 stages or ashramas. Each stage lasted for 25 years. Brahmacharya was a period of disciplined life and education. Grihastha was when man married and led a domestic life. Vanaprastha was when man spent time in the service of others and detached himself from worldly life and went into the forests and meditated. Sannyas was when man completely left the comforts of domestic life and became an ascetic, meditating to gain salvation. The later Vedic period saw a more settled life with towns developing all over. The increased use of iron and other metals helped make better tools, leading to better production. Now, pottery, weaving, and carpentry were common occupations. But still, agriculture was the basic means of livelihood. They grew rice, wheat, barley, along with fruits and vegetables. Domestication of animals was also important. Crafts, like greyware pottery, were also introduced during this time. During Brahmacharya, students had to leave home and live in gurukuls, or the residence of the gurus. Upanayanam, or thread ceremony, marked the beginning of student life. The gurukuls were away from the cities, close to nature. While staying in the gurukul, students had to help in domestic chores, like looking after animals, cutting wood. There was no difference between rich and poor students. No fee was charged, but some students gave guru dakshina. There was no writing method. Lessons were oral. Students had to memorize large chunks of information. Subjects like mathematics, astronomy, and even military science were taught. The whole course could take as much as about 18 years. Comparison between the early Vedic age and later Vedic age. Early Vedic age. The Aryans lived in the Sap-Sindhu area and called it Brahmavarta. At this time, the leader of the jana was a Nan who was often elected. The Sabha and the Samiti were powerful assemblies which checked the power of the king. The women enjoyed almost equal powers as men. The caste system was based on occupation, and one could change one's occupation and caste. They worshipped nature gods like Agri, Surya, and Janasa. The method of worship was quite simple. They lived in small villages and settlements. They were mainly involved in pastoral activities. Later Vedic age. The Aryans occupied land between the Himalayas and the Vindhyas, called this region Aryavarta. The position of the king was mainly hereditary. The Sabha and the Samiti had lost most of their power, and the king became all-powerful. The position of women degraded. They were no longer given the same rights as men. The caste system became rigid. It was now hereditary, and one could not change one's caste. Gods like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva were worshipped. The method of worship became expensive and complicated, involving many animal sacrifices. New towns were developed. Agriculture was very important, and new trades emerged.